Welcome back to Detroit Next, the podcast where we're breaking down everything from the candidates to the issues that are going on in this municipal election in Detroit in 2025. I'm Bryce Huffman with Bridge Detroit, and I am joined by State Rep Tyrone Carter, who is running for City Council District 6. Good morning, Tyrone.
Good morning, Bryce. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And for the first question, I've been asking everyone this per Malachi Barrett's request, who is our City Hall reporter. Who do you think should be leading City Council in this next iteration of the council?
That's a great question. I hadn't thought about it. There's some folks on there with experience. I bring experience. We'll see what happens. I think we have to wait until the menu's set to sit down and have those conversations. But I am hearing whispers that a couple people are, moving in the background trying to secure votes. I'll say that. I'll say that about Detroit, and I'll say it about Lansing. There's very few secrets. If somebody's asking a question as a retired investigator, you usually have an idea of what the answer is. You're just trying to figure it out or confirm.
Got it. Also, I'm going to make sure that I pause my notifications because I can tell that that's going to be annoying. So let's get into District 6. Obviously, you are a state rep, so you already kind of represent this area, but you want to be more local. What will be different about going from the state rep level to the city council level for you?
So there's a quote by Tip O'Neill: all politics are local. So, to cover, like right now, I covered Detroit, maybe 60% of the district, but I've had 100% before redistricting. So I covered Detroit, Ecorse, and River Rouge. And what I see is um, the opportunity to bring the leadership, my experience, work experience, business experience, and life experience, to District 6. Um, Politics are local. When I've been, bringing funds to the city of Detroit, as I'm knocking on doors, I've gotten a lot of responses that people haven't seen any changes in their district or their neighborhood. So um, that's the why.
All right, so let's talk about some of those changes that you hope to bring to District 6. If you're elected, what are the top three priorities you have for the district, and do you have kind of a plan for how to go about achieving all of those three?
The first one is we've got to address this educational. I don't know what it is. District 6 probably has the most diverse community, but it also has the most diverse school systems. We have charter, we have public charter, and we also have a private school. And this is how I explain it to my colleagues in Lansing, because some of them are anti-charter school because they don't have any in their districts. I have to explain to them, children don't decide where they go to school, parents do. We've got to figure out a level playing field for a seamless transition. I could have a family in Southwest Detroit that one kid goes to Western, one goes to Cesar Chavez or Hope Academy, and the other one goes to Christa Ray. So we've got to figure out, if they make a move to go from one school to another, how's that transition look? That is the biggest thing. Because right now there's no real standards that charters and public and private have. You may have to catch up when you move from one of those schools. So what I've done, I've been in contact with almost every school board president in my district, and I expect to continue that relationship, and shrinking it when it comes to Detroit specific. Having those conversations. March is reading month. I make sure that I go to every school. It doesn't matter if it's chartered or, because you want to be a friend and make suggestions as opposed to being elected and feel like you're imposing on people without any funding. So we've worked hard to make sure that schools got funding, the breakfast and lunch things that people really don't think are big things, but they really are big things. So, schools are number one. Health is the second one. Met with DMC maybe a month and a half ago, and we talked about what that, I don't know what they call that bill out of DC is going to do, but 70% of the folks that go to DMC are Medicaid eligible. We've got to think about things as a public health crisis. We've been through that with COVID. We have to continue to have access, but also folks need to be able to have insurance or an opportunity. In maybe 30, 20 years ago, there were 17, 18 hospitals in the city of Detroit. There's only 6 now. So we've got to continue to make sure that folks have access to health care. Not, urgent care. That's like putting a Band-Aid on it, getting you in quick enough. But, real care, whether it's doctor's offices. And finally, transportation infrastructure. It's really expensive to be poor in the city of Detroit. Um, car insurance, we fought like hell to change that. I pay close to $6,000 a month for car insurance. So what does that look like to a person making $40,000? We've got to figure out a better way, and we put money toward transportation and infrastructure because you should not lose your job because your mode of transportation is unreliable in the city.
All right. So let's start with transportation because that's actually a beat that I covered for Bridge Detroit. One of the big issues that I keep hearing with DDOT is that they need more drivers, but to get more drivers, they need to pay the drivers more. And to pay the drivers more, they have to raise the wages for them and the mechanics at a somewhat equal rate. What is kind of your approach to fixing public transportation in Detroit, and who are all of the levels of government that need to be involved in that?
So we've been talking about regional transportation in this area for a long time, but we have to understand that while other cities were building, real infrastructure for subways and railways, Detroit was building highways because of the big three. So we've got to transition with that because most young people don't want to own cars, don't want to drive. Some days I don't want to drive, but that is the easiest way to get to Lansing. There's not a bus. So I think it needs to be all hands on deck because when you hear about, in the past, people didn't come here, companies didn't build here because of the regional transportation or the transportation issue. The biggest issue is parity. Um, Other bus systems shouldn't pay more. I'm a former union contract negotiator. And what we used to take is what we would call comparables. Detroit shouldn't make less than anybody else for doing the same job. That's the equivalent of working at Burger King or Wendy's, and McDonald's is paying more. You're going to go where they pay more. You're going to attract folks that pay more. And folks are going to stay longer when they're valued. So we have to raise those levels, let the drivers know that they're appreciated by paying them what their counterparts make in other places. And we need more buses. We need smaller routes, but we also need efficiency. You shouldn't, and I rode the buses, I want to say a month and a half ago with the group, just to see. And folks, before I got a job, I caught the bus to work for a long time. So it's nothing that has been lost on me. But, to ride the bus and to see, there's been some improvements, but there's room for more improvement and the efficiency. And adding some of the lines back because people shouldn't have to walk for a mile or a mile and a half to get to a bus stop in the city of Detroit.
All right. Let's switch gears just a little bit and talk about the incoming mayoral administration. Detroit's going to have a new mayor for the first time in 12 years. Uh, Obviously, that means that it's going to be someone other than Mike Duggan, who might have different priorities, a different way of doing things. What are some opportunities you see for the new mayor that Duggan maybe didn't take advantage of? And then what are some potential threats facing us that Mayor Duggan maybe didn't have to account for?
And I've said that, and that was one of the reasons I decided to run. We're going to have a new mayor for the first time in 12 years and at least two new city council people. Um, so there's going to be a transition, and we have to look at it. I can take a step back and look at it from the state level. All the monies that we've sent to the city, all the federal monies that have been sent to the city to do projects, it's pretty much gone. And also the relationship. So I think that the new mayor will have an opportunity to focus on more community issues. Neighborhoods that have been, saying, hey, the two Detroit thing, but if there's no downtown, there's no Detroit. Let's be clear about that. If your heart's not strong, the rest of the body's going to wither away. So downtown is a strong heart now. So I think this gives the opportunity to, do pilot programs in different neighborhoods to see what, and meet with the district reps to say, okay, what do your neighborhoods want and where can we start this project, with the help of maybe tax dollars and private businesses to make folks feel that, okay, we're not left out. I'm sure you hear that all the time.
Right.
Um, we've been here 20, 30, 40 years and we look like the new incoming folks get more. So, as a homer, I live in the house I grew up in. In the neighborhood I grew up, it's a blessing and a curse sometimes because you know everybody, and then they have this
Right.
unreasonable expectation that you can fix everything with a magic wand. But just that I think is going to be the great opportunity for the incoming. Now the challenge is going to be how do we pay for it? You have the pension liability coming up in a couple years. Like I said, the COVID and the ARPA dollars are gone. So we can't tax our way out of this because we're already the highest taxed municipality that I know of, clearly in the state of Michigan. So we've got to create either some new revenue or some new cuts, which is interesting because I was in DC for the Congressional Black Caucus. We went to dinner and I took a picture of the receipt. There's a surcharge that goes to the city on dining. Everybody will go to Vegas and other places, and we don't care what a hotel costs because we're in Vegas. But when you start looking at your bills like I do, because I'm really frugal with my money, what is this tax? What is this tax? What is this tax? Um, we can't continue to tax residents. We've got to figure out other ways. So I have some ideas how we can do it, and I've heard it floated about a surcharge on the tickets. I said that 10, 12 years ago. When we get new stadiums, if you're paying $90 for a ticket, a buck, hell, we complain about Ticketmaster and everybody else getting a chip. I think that we can look at that as well.
All right. You brought up the ARPA dollars not being here. We had almost $1 billion in federal investment, and obviously the current federal administration does not have that relationship to Detroit. As a matter of fact, it's more of an antagonistic relationship to Detroit. How are you going to go about communicating from the city council level to the state level to the federal level, ways to get resources into Detroit? What does that process look like, given what we're seeing at the federal level?
I think the first thing you have to do is be respectful. Time out for the name calling. I've been really successful. For my first 4 years in the legislature, we were in minority. I was still able to get things done. Because there's some reasonable people on both sides of the aisle. There's some unreasonable people on both sides of the aisle. So you create these relationships and you have these conversations about what's best for the people that you represent. And you just advocate for them. And it won't change from the state level to the city level. Matter of fact, I should be able to increase that because of the relationships I have with legislators and the relationships with our federal partners as well, to look and see, but also understanding that Democrats are in minority everywhere. So we've got to be really strategic on how we get what we need, and it's going to be a challenge. Let's not fool anybody, especially with the current administration and some of the antics or distractions. But we have to be able to set our priorities and move in a way that hopefully, like I tell folks when I was on appropriations, you may want 10 million for your project, but what can you live with? Because you got zero now. So we've got to be able to negotiate and have real numbers of what we can get done, because walking away with nothing gets you nothing. So I think being able to negotiate and have those conversations and relationships will bode well for my district and the city and the state, hopefully, moving forward.
All right. One last thing on this, or I guess there's two more things I want to discuss with the federal administration. Obviously, District 6 has a lot of industry. We're seeing that the federal government is clawing back a lot of environmental regulations. What do we do to protect the health of people in your district?
So the biggest thing is you have to have conversations with these stakeholders, I call them. If they're in your district, they're worthy of a conversation. It doesn't matter what their status is. They're a stakeholder, and they have a vested interest in its successes. Now, folks like to point to Marathon, which is a mile from my house, and we've had this is not the same community 10 years ago, and Marathon's not the same company. They have community advisory panels where neighborhood folks go in and meet, and we talk about issues. If there's a flare up, if there's an issue, okay, what can we do to be a better neighbor? My goal would be to duplicate that to some of the places and spaces that nobody's ever reached out to at the city level. And they tell me that all the time. Being a state legislator, I meet with them. Eagle has done some things in the community, and we'll continue to have those conversations in the hopes that it's for the best of the community. If the speed limit is 70, but you're driving 80 because you can, may cause problems. The point is, because they remove the caps, it won't be good business for some of the industries if they start to pollute the community. So have those conversations with them. Expansion, I don't see the need for expansion in many of these industries. So a lot can be learned just by having those conversations and engaging folks, not in an antagonistic way, but sit down and say, how can we coexist with these new rules?
All right. And then lastly, on the federal level, uh, obviously the Trump administration is sending troops and they are so-called declaring war on black and brown communities across the country. What can we do as a city to kind of prepare our residents and protect our residents?
You said it best. Prepare our residents. So I've had these conversations because, of course, you probably know that Southwest Detroit probably has the largest um, Hispanic community in the state. Second, I think Grand Rapids is second. We also have a huge Mideastern population at the Dearborn border, Michigan and Lanyo area. So what we do is sit down and have those conversations. And when I bring this up, folks look at me and say, didn't think about that. I had to have these conversations with my son of driving while black if we've got a decent car. You can be pulled over just because when he was driving down to school because he went to an HBCU. You have to be mindful of your surroundings. And there's nothing worse than you being dead right. Think about that, being dead right. You don't want to be dead because you were right. You want to be able to figure out how do I navigate what's going on and get to a place where people can get me help. So we've had those town hall meetings and conversations. Matter of fact, from my office, we sent out information to almost every school in the district, whether it applied to them or not. These are the resources because we have to let people know if we can't stop things from coming, and we can't, folks will tell you we're going to stop the federal government. You cannot. Okay, we're at the city level. But what we won't do is use city dollars and resources to assist because that's not what people pay taxes for in the city of Detroit. But the biggest thing we can do is get folks as much information, get them to the trusted sources that communities trust. So in this community, there's LaSed, there's Southwest Business, so there's Sir Metro, there's Congress of Communities, Cesar Chavez again. There are folks that trust them because they've been in the community, they've been stakeholders. Have those conversations with those leaders and get that information out there to them. But let them know that I'm a homer. I'm protecting home, but we've got to do it strategically and smartly.
All right. I've only got a few more questions for you. I'll transition to one that is affecting a lot of people in my age group, 25 to 35, people who are trying to buy houses for the first time in the city, people who are thinking of starting families. One of the biggest issues we keep hearing, not just from that group, but particularly in that group, is the property tax issue for homeowners. Property taxes are just too high. What can be done about that? And have you heard any solutions that might sound interesting to you, or maybe have some wiggle room to make some things happen there?
Yeah, so two of my son's friends recently bought houses, one in the University District and the other one over in East English Village. And it was all good until that uncapped property tax hit their mortgage. And, they called me, we sat down and we called the assessor's office to find out, what could be done. The first thing is the appeal. The second thing is we've got to address that because I have friends who are realtors and, they've sat at the table getting ready to close on a house. When the new tax liability came in, they said, oh, I could move someplace else with a different school system, cheaper car insurance. It might not be as much house, but we've got to look at ways. So I've been meeting with the assessor's office, Alvin Horn, and he's agreeable to looking at some of the things that we can do to, number one, kind of control it, keep it under wraps, and be in compliance with the law. But more importantly, find that relief that people want and need. Because if you're buying a house in the city of Detroit, you want to be here, but you want to be able to afford to be here at a reasonable amount of money. And like I said earlier, I know the previous mayor, well, no, the current mayor, we tried the land value tax. We've got to figure out a way to lower the taxes for the people like me that are here and for the people. Um, Mine is capped. I've been here since 76. But for folks who come in, if I were to sell my house, because I bought a house down the street, it almost tripled. So that we've got to work on those unintended consequences and those surprises that can change folks' lives. So taxing is a huge issue. I'm going to dive in deep. Once I'm elected, I did it somewhat at the state level, but I've got to oversee 3 cities. But I'll be more targeted and specific once I'm elected.
All right. And then lastly, let's talk about what you've been learning from residents as you've been campaigning for city council specifically. So obviously, the state level and the local level have some differences, but it's the experience that you're bringing that is probably attracting voters. What are you hearing from them that maybe you didn't expect to hear, or maybe you're hearing less of than you expected? What are the surprises so far?
The biggest surprise is the lack of response um, that residents are saying that they get from the current council seat. The lack of follow up, constituent services. Constituent services is probably the largest thing that you'll do in any one of these jobs. Folks don't care what laws you pass. Folks don't care about what bills you worked on. Da, da, da. They care about, did you call me back? Did you send me somewhere where I can get my issue addressed? And so I can say that you know without hesitation, my office in Lansing with 2 people, we served a whole lot of folks with constituent services, and we learned how to do it. We dove in feet first during COVID and unemployment. My good friend Isaac Robinson had passed, so there was nobody covering his office. So we took that on because people were struggling. It was a survival mode issue. So just returning phone calls and directing people is one of the biggest. It was actually shocking given the amount of staff that City Council has. That folks were complaining about the lack of follow up, the lack of addressing the issue. I mean, if you can't help people, tell them. But I can send you somewhere where hopefully they can help you. I think that is the biggest surprise given the staffing of City Council. And it was consistent throughout the district.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tyrone, state rep, who is currently running for District 6 City Council. Thank you for your time and good luck out there.
Thank you so much.